Welcome to Terrifying Creepy Stories, the place where the dark corners of forgotten places come alive through bone-chilling true tales. If you're new here, I'm glad you found us. And to my loyal subscribers, thank you for always returning to the shadows with me. Before we dive into tonight's haunting story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next terrifying upload. And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these creepy stories travel. Now, turn the lights down, and let's begin. I'm not the kind of person who writes reviews, especially not for places I stay. I've always felt like most experiences are a mixed bag. You take the good with the bad and move on. But what happened in Gainesville, Florida, changed that for me. And it's the first time I've ever said this. I truly regret not booking a hotel. It was the middle of August, and the weather had that soupy heaviness Florida's famous for. I'd been planning a small reunion with my older cousin Troy. We hadn't seen each other in years, and he'd recently moved back from California after a messy divorce. I figured a low-key getaway would be good for both of us. Nothing big, just a couple of days catching up, barbecuing, watching late-night horror flicks. Simple. I scrolled through Airbnb listings for about a week. Most of them were either overpriced or too run down. Then I found it. A modest brick duplex just outside the city, tucked at the edge of an older neighborhood with a lot of oak trees and cracked sidewalks. The photos weren't glossy, but they looked real. The kitchen had these retro mint green cabinets. The living room had a plaid couch and an old box TV. It reminded me of the kind of house our grandma used to live in, not fancy, but warm. The host's name was Dennis, and his profile described him as a retired contractor who now managed a handful of rental properties around the area. His reviews were solid, all 5 stars, mostly short but positive blurbs like, "Great value," and "Clean and quiet." So I booked 3 nights. We arrived late in the afternoon, right as the sky started bruising into that burnt orange twilight. Troy was driving, and we passed through a bunch of empty roads surrounded by palm trees and occasional chain-link fences with "Beware of dog" signs. The streets were strangely quiet for a Thursday. Barely any people walking around, just a few houses with flickering porch lights and yards overtaken by weeds. We pulled up in front of the house, and I immediately felt like something was off. Not wrong, just off. The windows were all closed, and the shades inside were drawn tight. There were no curtains fluttering from the AC, no faint sounds of music or TVs inside, just a stillness, like the whole place was holding its breath. Dennis had left a key under a small metal frog by the door. We let ourselves in. The smell hit me first, not foul, just stale, like a room that's been closed up for weeks. The air was thick and still. Troy flicked on the lights and did a slow spin. "Man, this place looks like it hasn't been touched since the late 80s. I shrugged. "Yeah, but it's cozy. Beats some plastic-feeling hotel." He dropped his bag by the couch and headed for the fridge. I started checking the rooms. The living room had a scratchy rug and an old floor fan that creaked when it rotated. The hallway was narrow, the walls painted a faded beige with tiny nicks near the baseboards. Everything felt like it had been lived in too long and cared for too little. I found a stack of extra sheets in the linen closet, but when I picked them up, a few tiny black specks scattered from underneath. I told myself it was just old lint or dust and moved on. We unpacked, sat around for a bit, then went out for burgers at a small joint a few blocks away. Nothing out of the ordinary. But when we came back, the house was dark, darker than I remembered. The porch light didn't flick on. Troy had to use his phone flashlight to find the keyhole. Once inside, the stillness felt heavier. The air was hotter now, and the faint smell I noticed earlier was stronger, like damp paper or wood that's been sitting in water too long. While Troy went to the bathroom, I headed into the kitchen to grab a drink. That's where everything changed. The overhead light buzzed faintly when I flipped the switch, then flickered and finally steadied. I opened the cupboard above the sink to look for a glass, and stopped. There were insects. Not one or two. Not even dozens. Hundreds. Small, brown, fast. They burst from the back wall of the cupboard like a living shadow, crawling over each other, falling onto the plates, some landing on the edge of the sink and vanishing behind it. I didn't yell. I just backed away slowly, heart picking up, eyes wide. I hadn't even fully processed what I was seeing yet. Troy walked in a few seconds later and froze at the look on my face. What? What happened? I just pointed toward the cupboard. He walked over, curious, then opened the silverware drawer. His voice was quiet. Oh man, no. The drawer looked alive. The forks and knives were practically buried under them, tiny twitching bodies crawling over the utensils like they owned the place. Some scattered into the dark corners when the drawer moved, but others stayed, unbothered, as if they'd grown used to it. Troy closed the drawer gently. Then he looked at me and said, "We're not staying here." I nodded, already grabbing my backpack. We didn't even take the food we'd bought. We left everything in the fridge, tossed our toothbrushes into plastic bags and left them in the car trunk. I couldn't stop thinking about how many of those things were crawling around that place, behind the walls, under the fridge, maybe inside the mattress seams. Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. We checked into a roadside motel off the I-75 that same night. It wasn't much, but it didn't smell like mildew and didn't move under its own weight. The next morning, I sent Dennis a message, calm, polite, direct. I attached photos and even a short video I'd recorded before we left. I told him we couldn't stay there and asked for a refund. His reply? 2 sentences. "That's Florida. Bugs are part of the deal. Sorry if it made you uncomfortable." That was it. No apology. No mention of pest control. Nothing. I contacted Airbnb directly after that. Uploaded the video, sent screenshots, filled out their little forms. A few days later, they got back to me. Their response: because I didn't reach out before leaving the rental, there was nothing they could do. They said I should have allowed the host a chance to resolve the issue on site. I couldn't believe it. Were we supposed to stick around? Sleep there? Let bugs crawl over us while we waited for someone to show up with a can of Raid? I tried to leave a review. I laid out everything honestly, didn't even exaggerate. But when I checked back later that night, the listing was gone. Not just the posts, the entire property had disappeared from Dennis's profile. I dug a little deeper. His profile still had dozens of listings, different names, same pictures, same floor tiles, same furniture, same kitchen, all under new listings, with fresh, glowing reviews. I reported it again, wrote to Airbnb, told them it looked like he was cycling out listings to avoid bad reviews. They never replied. I haven't used Airbnb since. I probably never will. I still have that video on my phone. I don't show it to people often, most just get grossed out. But to me, it's a reminder, not just of the bugs, but of how easy it is to fake a clean space, to bury complaints, to hide behind policies and canned emails. We were lucky, honestly. We left early. But I think about the family after us, or the elderly couple before us, and I wonder how many nights people spent there, thinking they were safe. Next time, I'll pay the extra $50 for the hotel. Because peace of mind? Turns out it's worth more than 5 stars. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend, with some time away from work, from noise, from the city. My girlfriend Alana and I had been planning it for weeks. We'd been together a little over 2 years, and after everything we'd been through, job losses, family drama, health scares, we both needed a place where the walls didn't already hold our stress. We chose a small town near Asheville, North Carolina. Somewhere out of the way, with hills and woods and roads that turned to gravel. I found a rental listed as the writer's cabin, A 2-bedroom house on the edge of an old neighborhood where driveways curled around oak trees, and the air was supposed to smell like pine and chimney smoke. The pictures showed wooden floors, a little fireplace, a huge bay window that overlooked nothing but trees. It looked peaceful. Simple. Lived in, but clean. We booked 4 nights. The drive up was long. We left right after work on a Friday, crawling through traffic for over an hour just to get out of the city. Once we cleared the sprawl, it was winding roads and scattered headlights. We passed dark houses, a few country stores already shuttered for the night, and long patches of road where the only sound was gravel kicking up against the undercarriage. Every now and then, I'd check my signal. 1 bar. Then nothing. Alana made a joke about how we were officially in horror movie territory. We got to the house just before 10. It was darker than I expected. No porch light, no welcome glow through the windows. Just the outline of the house against a tree line and a single security light flickering near the back driveway like it hadn't worked right in years. I parked. We sat in the car for a moment, just looking at it. "You sure this is the one?" Alana asked. I double-checked the address on my phone and pointed toward the mailbox. That's it. The front door had an electronic lock. The code had been emailed to me earlier that day by the property manager, someone named Edgar who never signed his emails, just sent one-line instructions. The keypad beeped quietly when I punched in the code. The deadbolt clicked, and the door pushed open without resistance. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not bad, just off. It was something between stale paper and forgotten laundry. Not the kind of scent you notice immediately. It sort of drifted in as you moved. I remember thinking maybe someone had just cleaned and left wet towels in a hamper or something. We walked in with the bags of groceries first: milk, eggs, some vegetables, cold drinks. The kitchen was right off the entryway, so I headed straight for the fridge. And stopped. It was full. Not just with random leftovers. This was someone's real, current fridge. A carton of half-used almond milk. Packaged deli meats. Condiments lined up like a miniature army. A slice of what looked like pecan pie in a glass container with someone's name, Daryl, written on the lid in black marker. Alana walked in behind me. I didn't say anything. I just opened the pantry. Cereal. Bread. Rice. Coffee. Not the sample kind you find in rentals, the open, already used kind. A jar of peanut butter with a butter knife still in it. Are we sure we're not breaking into someone's house right now?" Alana said, trying to sound amused, but her voice was tighter now. I called out. "Hello?" No answer. I stepped further in. The lights were on dimmers, so the whole house felt like it was breathing in half-light, warm and yellow in some corners, shadowed in others. The hallway was narrow, lined with faded framed photos. Nothing fancy, just people at cookouts, kids on swings, a guy with a dog. Everything was arranged like someone had just gone out for the day and hadn't expected visitors. A coat hung on a hook near the door. A pair of sneakers pushed neatly against the wall. A paperback book left open on the coffee table beside a mug of what might have been coffee, long since dried at the edges. We stood in the living room for a while, unsure of what to do. I checked the email again. The subject line read, "Your stay at Ryder's cabin." It had the address, the code, a reminder to make yourself at home. I even scrolled down to the part that said, "The house will be empty upon arrival." So what the hell was this? We didn't want to touch anything. It just felt wrong. Like we had stumbled into something deeply personal without permission. I pictured a man coming back from the grocery store, seeing our car out front, unlocking the door and thinking someone had broken in. And maybe calling the cops before we had a chance to explain. Alana started getting anxious. "Let's just go. We can figure it out in the car." I agreed. We backed out carefully, turned off the lights, and locked the door again behind us. From the car, I called the emergency number listed on the app. It rang twice before someone answered. A man. Tired sounding. Raspy voice. Edgar speaking. I explained the situation. He was quiet for a while. Then he sighed. Yeah, we've been trying to get that place cleared out. Owner passed away last month. His daughter's handling the estate, but she lives up in Minnesota or Michigan or somewhere. Said she'd get around to it. I thought she had already taken care of it. There was a pause. You can stay, he said. Just push things aside. It's safe. No one's coming back. We didn't respond at first. Alana looked at me. You want to stay in a dead guy's house? I asked Edgar if there was another property available. He said everything else was booked. We sat there for a while. I kept looking at the house, thinking about what he said. We needed a place. It was already late. We didn't know the area, and the town itself was at least 30 minutes back. Hotels were a gamble this far out. Eventually I said, let's just go in. We'll stay one night. See how it feels. Back inside, we cleared space on the dining table. There were unopened mail envelopes scattered across it, some utility bills, others from what looked like hospitals. One was addressed to Harold M. Glassman. The bedroom was worse. It wasn't dirty. Just frozen in time. A suit jacket still hanging on the back of the closet door. A pair of reading glasses on the nightstand beside a handwritten list, grocery items and a scribbled reminder. Call Dr. Heller, confirmed Tuesday. But what unsettled me most was the bathroom. In the medicine cabinet, neatly arranged on the shelves, were prescription bottles. Half-used. Some with faded labels. One of them had the word oncology printed in small letters at the bottom. There were syringes in a sealed box. An unopened bottle of some kind of nutritional shake. And, folded on the sink's edge, a towel with bloodstains that had turned rust brown. We didn't sleep much that night. Alana stayed on the couch. I laid on the bed without pulling the covers back. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both felt it, the weight of the place, the lingering presence of someone who had suffered in silence, who had probably died alone, surrounded by the quiet hum of a fridge still holding their last meals. We left at sunrise. Didn't even wait for the birds to start up. Just packed quickly, left the key on the kitchen counter, and drove. I didn't leave a review. I didn't contact Edgar again. I just kept thinking about how casually he said it. You can stay. No one's coming back. Like the man who lived there had simply become an empty name on a booking calendar. But he wasn't. He was a person. And we had slept in the last place he ever called home. I've always been pretty careful about who I let onto my property, especially ever since we converted the guest house out back into a rental. I live in the smaller front unit with my wife. It's not fancy, just a cozy two-bedroom place with old wood floors and creaky windows that swell when it rains. The guest house sits behind a privacy fence, tucked away at the end of a short gravel path. We made it feel like its own little world back there. Hosting had been smooth for the most part. I had dozens of 5-star reviews and a consistent stream of quiet, respectful guests. Families, traveling nurses, work-from-anywhere types. I'd even gotten used to last-minute bookings. But this one I'll never forget. It came in on a Monday evening, right around 5:40 p.m. The guy booked for 5 nights, instant confirmation, no special requests. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The only problem was, our regular cleaner, Alondra, had broken down on the expressway earlier that day. Her sister called me around 1 p.m. to say the transmission on her car had just died. No way she'd make it out in time. That meant it was up to me and my wife to get the place ready. We used to clean it ourselves before we could afford help, so it wasn't unfamiliar. It just wasn't ideal. I figured if we hustled, we could have it done by 7:30. As a courtesy, I messaged the guest right away. Told him there was a delay, explained we were personally handling the cleaning to make sure everything would still be perfect for his arrival. I even offered a $75 credit to make up for the inconvenience, and let him know that if it was a deal breaker, he could cancel without penalty. No response. That's when I got a little uneasy. I always get some kind of acknowledgement, especially when there's a refund involved. I tried the number on his profile. It rang once, then disconnected. No voicemail. Just to be safe, I sent a text anyway so there'd be a record. Told him again that we'd have the place ready shortly and to check his messages for the credit. We worked straight through, scrubbing, vacuuming, laying out towels, restocking the toiletries. The usual rhythm. We finished a few minutes past 7:30 and sent another message letting him know the place was ready to go. Still no word. I tried calling again. No answer. I left it alone after that. It was already getting dark, and frankly, I was too tired to obsess. The night passed with no sign of him. No lights on in the guest house. No motion on the driveway sensor. By mid-morning the next day, I figured maybe he was just running late. It happens. People get held up, miss a flight, decide to stay somewhere else the first night. I try not to overthink it. Then at 10:45 a.m., a new message appeared. And just like that, everything changed. It was a long, rambling rant. Disjointed. Full of anger and accusations. He claimed the address was wrong, said he'd been wandering around all night, trying to find the property, and insisted he'd been forced to sleep behind a gas station with his niece because they had nowhere else to go. He demanded a full refund, plus an extra 3 nights somewhere else, of his choosing, for free. Said the whole experience was disgusting, accused me of scamming him, and finished it off by saying he was done waiting for answers, and was going to start making serious phone calls. It felt less like a complaint and more like a threat. My wife read it over my shoulder and went completely still. I messaged him back immediately, polite but firm. Reiterated the offer, said I was happy to help him get a refund and cancel the stay, and asked him not to return to the property until we sorted things out. Then I called the platform's customer service. I spent nearly 30 minutes getting bounced between reps. Each one promised to escalate the issue, and said someone would get back to me within the hour. No one ever did. That night, we kept the lights off and the curtains closed. We weren't sure if he'd try to show up again. The next afternoon, just before sunset, I stepped outside to water the planters and heard someone walking on the gravel path behind the hedge. I turned. There he was. Stocky build. Late 40s, maybe? Wearing a stained hoodie and carrying a plastic grocery bag. His eyes scanned the yard like he was trying to memorize it. "You the owner?" he asked. "I am," I said, keeping my distance. "You must be the guest." He nodded, kind of. "Yeah, well, I didn't appreciate what happened." I calmly explained that the place had been ready on time, and we had reached out multiple times. I said again that I'd be happy to refund his stay, and that it was probably best we didn't move forward. He didn't answer. Just looked at my house behind me. That moment, the way his eyes wandered past me toward the front door, still gives me chills. After a few more seconds of silence, he turned and walked away. No apology. No goodbye. Just vanished down the alley. But he came back that night. He knocked on our windows. Tapped the glass like he was trying to draw attention without being loud. He walked around the back of the house, into our private yard, and stood outside the bedroom door for a full minute before walking off again. We stayed frozen in place. I wanted to call the police, but technically he hadn't done anything illegal yet. Not quite. I called the platform again. Spoke to another 3 reps. Same line. "We're investigating. Please be patient." He kept messaging us over the next couple of days. Accusatory, unpredictable messages. Some were full of threats, others weirdly casual. At one point, he claimed he'd contacted the mayor's office about me. I told him clearly, "You are not allowed on this property anymore. I've reported the issue, and if you return again, I will contact law enforcement." Finally, on the last night of his supposed stay, the platform called me. A new voice. A new agent. Same old line. Would you be open to issuing a refund and canceling the booking, just to de-escalate the situation? I almost laughed. You're calling now? After 4 days of silence? The woman on the other end was polite, but robotic. She apologized, said she understood our concern, and asked if I had any other questions. I hung up. It was only later that night, out of sheer unease, that I decided to run a background check. His profile picture was a scanned ID, so I had a name. A quick search pulled up court records from a nearby county. Multiple charges, including harassment and assault. He didn't live far. Maybe 25 minutes away. He hadn't been lost. He wasn't abandoned behind a gas station. He could have gone home at any point. But he didn't. He lingered. And that's what scares me the most. We've since added more locks, security cameras, and motion lights. I don't accept same-day bookings anymore. And I check every guest's name more thoroughly than I probably should. Because I can't forget the way he looked at my home. Like it was his. Like he still might come back. I booked the place a week ahead of time. I was heading to Portsville for a job fair, just a 2-day trip, but I needed somewhere I could stay, rest, and get ready without distractions. I didn't want to deal with hotels this time. They always feel sterile and overpriced. I found a rental on a listing site that looked decent enough. The host, a man named Greg, described it as a private self-contained studio with independent access, ideal for solo travelers or working professionals. It wasn't the best part of town, but I didn't care. I just wanted a quiet, affordable place for one night. The reviews were a bit mixed, nothing glaring, but a few people did mention Greg being a little disorganized. I assumed that meant maybe he was late responding or slow to clean. No big deal. I arrived late in the afternoon, just before sundown. The neighborhood felt deserted, like one of those forgotten edges of the city where nothing seems to fully function anymore. Cracked pavement, locked storefronts with faded signage, and houses with bent satellite dishes still clinging to the walls. The building itself was a dull 2-story structure with chipped paint and weeds growing from the cracks in the stairs. I was halfway up when I noticed a ripped screen door hanging loose, slapping lightly against the frame in the wind. I messaged Greg to say I'd arrived. No response. I rang the bell. Nothing. After a minute, I tried the keypad code he'd sent me earlier. It worked. The lock clicked, and I pushed the door open. It smelled faintly of old wood and something else, kind of metallic, like the tang of pennies or blood. The studio was one large open room, with a couch, a kitchenette, and a queen-sized bed at the far wall. Not luxurious, but it was cleaner than I expected. Dimly lit. The windows were covered with heavy curtains, and the air was still, like no one had opened a window in weeks. I dropped my backpack, checked the small fridge empty, and sat on the edge of the bed to check my emails. Then, about 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I thought maybe it was Greg, coming to check in or say hello. I opened it. There was a guy standing there, maybe mid-30s, wearing a worn-out backpack and holding a grocery bag with a toothbrush sticking out the top. He looked confused at first. Then he blinked and said, "Oh, you're here already?" I stared at him. "Yeah, who are you?" "I'm staying here," he said, pointing past me. "Greg said I could check in tonight." There was a moment where we just stared at each other, like neither of us had the language for what was happening. I told him this was a private rental, that I had already paid and checked in hours ago. He pulled out his phone and showed me the booking confirmation. Different platform, different listing, same address, same date. I stepped back and let him inside, because I honestly didn't know what else to do. He walked in like he'd done it before, dropped his bag near the couch, looked around like he was scanning the room for signs of intrusion. It was the strangest thing, like he wasn't surprised, just annoyed. I called Greg immediately. No answer. Texted. Nothing. Now it was getting dark outside, and I was sitting in this half-lit room with a stranger who also believed he had every right to be there. He opened a soda from his bag and started drinking it like we were roommates or something. I asked, "So, what's your plan?" He shrugged. I paid. I'm staying the night." "Same here. Guess we're both staying." The couch was barely long enough for a child to sleep on. The bed was the only decent surface in the room. No air mattress. No extra linens. Nothing. I tried calling Greg again. Still nothing. I didn't want to fight, so I calmly said, "Look, I'm not comfortable sharing a bed with a total stranger." He gave a half laugh, like it wasn't a big deal. "I'm not a weirdo, man. I'll take one side. We'll sleep back to back." That's not the point, I thought. But there was no reasoning with someone who didn't see the issue. I messaged customer support on the platform. Explained everything. While waiting for a response, I opened my laptop and tried to work, pretend this wasn't happening. But I couldn't concentrate. The guy was humming to himself. Unpacking. Even took off his shoes and started clipping his toenails like this was his own space. The whole time, I kept thinking, what if I fall asleep, and he goes through my bag? What if he takes something? Or worse. I didn't even know his name. He never offered it. Later that night, around 11:30, I heard Greg finally call back. I answered immediately. He sounded tired. Or drunk. Maybe both. "Oh yeah, man. Sorry about that. I had to rent it to 2 people. Bills, man. Things are tight this month. I figured it would work itself out." He actually said that. I figured it would work itself out. I hung up on him. Customer service finally replied an hour later. Said they were reviewing the case and would get back to me. By then, I'd already made up my mind. I gathered my stuff quietly, booked a hotel 5 blocks away, and left. Didn't say a word to the guy on the couch. Just walked out into the cold air, past dim streetlights and overflowing bins. The next morning, I got a full refund. No questions asked? But that wasn't the part that lingered. It was the realization that someone would casually rent a confined, single-room space to 2 complete strangers. Not care what happened next. Just because they had a bill to pay. I kept thinking, what if I hadn't shown up first? What if he did? And what if he hadn't been relatively normal? That night could have ended very differently. I'd spent the past week in a modest Airbnb flat on the 2nd floor of a residential building just outside the Old Town district of Horrifying, Crete. The trip had been mostly smooth, quiet neighborhood, a decent view of the rooftops, and a small bakery downstairs that opened early every morning and made the entire street smell like warm sesame and fresh dough. I was there alone, just wrapping up a solo trip I'd taken to reset my head a bit. My flight back to the UK was scheduled for the next day, so I'd packed everything that evening and was ready to leave first thing in the morning. I remember looking at the clock after turning off the lamp. It was a little after 1:40 a.m. I wasn't especially tired, but I'd been lying in bed with my eyes closed anyway, scrolling through old photos in my mind, just trying to wind down. Then, around 2:15 a.m., I heard something. At first it sounded like muffled voices. Maybe someone coming home from a night out, maybe a couple arguing. I've stayed in enough foreign apartments to know that walls in these older buildings can be thin, and I didn't think much of it at first. The TV in the unit next door had been on earlier in the evening, so I figured maybe someone was just a bit drunk and laughing too loud. But the tone shifted. The laughing turned into yelling. And not the kind of playful, drunken yelling that ends with a slammed door or someone throwing up in the bathroom. This was more focused, more desperate. A woman was shouting. Her voice cracked a little as she screamed, and her words cut clean through the drywall between us. She was speaking in English, clear, frantic, terrified. "Get out!" I said, "Get out!" "I didn't say yes, I never said yes. Just go, leave me alone." I sat up in bed. My mouth was dry. I thought, at first, maybe I'd misheard. That maybe it was a TV. But no, there was a rawness in her voice that wasn't performative. It was too real. Too personal. My heart was already beating faster, and I hadn't even fully processed what was happening yet. There was a man's voice, lower and harder to make out. He had an accent I couldn't quite place. Something Mediterranean maybe, possibly Greek or Albanian, I wasn't sure. He wasn't yelling like her. His tone was quieter, almost like he was trying to calm her down, but whatever he was saying wasn't working. Then I heard a thud. Something hitting the floor. Maybe furniture being pushed. I got up, barefoot, and crept to the door of my flat. The hallway was still. I opened the door just slightly, not even enough for it to click. I don't know what I expected to hear, but it was coming from the unit next to mine, just one wall away. I backed inside, shut the door quietly, and grabbed my phone. I dialed the emergency services line I'd saved after landing. I don't speak Greek, but they had an English-speaking option. It rang. A woman answered, and I started explaining the situation, telling her I was a tourist, that I was in a rented flat, and that I thought someone in the unit next door was being attacked. She told me to hold. I waited for maybe a minute, then 2. The line went silent. No music. No operator. Just nothing. I checked the call, still connected. Then it dropped. The woman next door had gone quiet again by then. I stood in my dark kitchen, holding the phone, unsure whether I should call again or knock on her door or just do nothing. Every scenario that ran through my mind felt inadequate. I called my girlfriend back home in Bristol. Whispered the whole thing to her while pacing barefoot in the apartment, tiptoeing across the cold tile like I was trying not to wake a sleeping animal. She told me to stay inside and try the police again. I did. Same response, put on hold, then silence. That time, I hung up after about a minute and redialed. The yelling started again. This time it was worse. Her voice was hoarse now, but she kept screaming. Stop it! Stop! No! Get off me! Over and over. There was a bang. Someone, hitting the wall. It was so close I instinctively took a step back like it had hit my wall. I panicked. I called the emergency line again and, in a louder voice, said, I think a woman is being assaulted. I don't know what's going on, but you need to send someone right now, please. This time, they asked for the building address and my floor number. I gave it. They didn't ask for much else. Roughly 7 minutes later, I heard heavy boots echoing up the stairwell. The apartment doors here are heavy steel, painted to look like wood, and when the police knocked next door, it sounded more like they were pounding it with a hammer. I could hear them talking, mostly in Greek. I heard a man's voice respond, low and mumbly. I didn't hear the woman. After about 10 minutes, the officers left. The hallway lights clicked off automatically, and everything went silent. No footsteps. No more yelling. Nothing. It was as if the building had swallowed the whole thing. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed by the window, peeking through the blinds every now and then, just watching the dark street below for anything that might feel wrong. I don't know what happened in that apartment. I don't know if the woman was okay. I didn't hear her voice again. When the sun rose and painted the rooftops gold, I packed my bag, zipped up my hoodie, and left. I never saw the neighbors. The hallway was quiet. No signs of damage. No broken glass. Just the faint scent of bleach from the cleaning woman's cart as she wheeled it in from the stairwell. That was 6 months ago, and it still haunts me, not because I saw anything, but because I didn't. I still wonder whether the police believed her. Whether they even asked her if she was okay. Whether she was even there when they arrived. And what if I hadn't called a third time? I've visited over 25 countries, most of them alone. I've walked through alleys in Johannesburg, navigated border towns in Eastern Europe, gotten lost in cities that didn't even show up on the map. But this night, in a quiet Greek apartment, just a wall away from a stranger's screams, was the first time I ever truly felt powerless. It was late September when my friend Kai and I decided to take a weekend trip out to Barrow Ridge, a small town in the eastern slope of the Downs, not far from Kent. The town didn't have much going on, but there was this music festival that drew a bit of a crowd every year, and we figured we'd make a weekend of it. Neither of us were into camping, so we agreed to book a place through HomeKey, kind of like Airbnb, just smaller. The place we found looked promising in the photos. A 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of town, whitewashed walls, climbing ivy around the doorframe, and those old timber beams across the ceilings that everyone thinks are quaint until they start knocking their head on them. The listing claimed it was rustic but clean, cozy, private, and only 10 minutes from the main event grounds. Sounded perfect for a weekend out of the city. We arrived sometime around 6 p.m. after driving nearly 5 hours from Norwich. The roads had been tight and winding the last hour, the sort that had no streetlights and felt like they hadn't been repaved since the 60s. The town itself was the kind of place where the only open shop was a petrol station that sold everything from bread to radiator fluid. We grabbed some snacks there, then made our way to the house. The cottage was set back a bit from the road, past a low stone wall and a rusted black gate that creaked open when I pushed on it. The path was uneven gravel, patchy and soft in places like it had rained the night before. A lamppost near the corner of the property flickered when we passed it, humming faintly like an insect trap. I remember glancing up at the windows as we walked toward the front door. The upstairs curtain was slightly drawn, and I had this momentary impression that someone had just moved out of view. Probably just the wind, I thought. Or maybe light bouncing oddly through the glass. Still, I felt that small, invisible tug in my chest, the one you get when something's off but not enough to say anything about. I ignored it. The key was in a lockbox mounted to the side of the door. I punched in the code the host had sent and opened it, and the key was there just as promised. But the second I turned the lock and pushed open the door, I realized something wasn't right. There was a smell. Not rotten. Not chemical. More like damp linens. Old soap. That dusty, humid scent of a room that's been shut for too long. You know it if you've ever opened a cupboard in an old house and found a stack of towels that haven't been touched in months. Ugh, Kai said behind me. Didn't they say they cleaned the place? The hallway was narrow, and the carpet underfoot had gone flat with age, with little gritty patches of something beneath the fabric that crunched softly when we stepped. I noticed the used tissue crumpled in the corner by the radiator. Not a great sign. We dropped our bags in the front room and did a quick walk through. This second bedroom turned out to be a narrow study with a deflated air mattress tossed onto the wooden floor. No frame, no sheets, no blanket. Just the plastic shell of the mattress and a hand towel folded on the desk beside it like an afterthought. In the kitchen, there were still dishes in the sink, crumbs on the counters, an open bag of crisps stuffed in the cupboard. The fridge smelled sour, and when I opened the vegetable drawer, there was a half-eaten apple wrapped in cling film. The core was brown, soft. I closed it and didn't open it again. Kai leaned against the kitchen doorway. Maybe they had someone cancel last minute and forgot to clean. Or maybe, I said, they just never clean at all. We'd both been hoping to shower before heading to the show that night, but the bathroom made that idea unbearable. The toilet seat had some kind of dried streak on the edge of it, brown, but not rusty. The sink was clogged with cloudy water, and what looked like small flakes of blackened skin floating near the surface. I tapped the tap and it sputtered, rattled, then shot out a freezing cold stream that never warmed up. The bathtub was lined with grime and had 2 thick, dark hairs stuck to the side, too thick to be mine or Kai's. The mirror was blotched with dried toothpaste, like someone had sneezed into it and walked away. We stood in silence for a while, just absorbing the atmosphere. The house was quiet, sure, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that's peaceful. It felt withdrawn, like the house itself was holding its breath. I decided to take a quick shower anyway, figuring we'd be out of there by morning. The water never got warm, and the towel I used smelled faintly like wet wool. I stood under that freezing spray trying not to gag every time my foot touched the slimy bottom of the tub. When I stepped out and toweled off, I noticed something strange. Behind the bathroom door, where the paint had peeled from the damp, there were deep gouges, like claw marks. Not scratches from furniture, not scuffs. Actual gouges, like someone had dragged a heavy metal object or fingers, I guess, along the wood. I ran my hand along them. They were smooth, not fresh, but deep. I didn't mention them to Kai. Back in the front room, I told him we were leaving. He didn't argue. I texted the host, some guy named Miro or Milo or something, and told him the place hadn't been cleaned and that we were checking into a hotel in town. I offered to return the key somewhere safe and even said I didn't mind covering part of the cost since I'd used the shower. He read the message and didn't reply until the next morning. When he finally did respond, it was hostile. Said we had tampered with the integrity of his home, that we clearly expected the experience of the Ritz, and that we were not the kind of guests this property is meant to host. I didn't even bother arguing. I sent the photos I'd taken, of the bathroom, the dishes, the mattress, all of it, to the booking platform and requested a refund. They got back to me within a few hours and issued a full return. We didn't go back to that house, not even to drop the key off. I left it under a potted plant near the gate, and walked away without looking back. That weekend was fun, in the end. The concert was great, the hotel clean and normal. But that house, something about it didn't sit right. The disrepair, the gouged wood, the strange way the upstairs curtain had moved when we first arrived. I kept wondering whether someone was still living there between guests. Maybe someone the host didn't mention. Or maybe the house wasn't being rented out legally at all. The gouges on the door haunted me most, not because of what they might mean, but because no one ever explained them. I've stayed in dozens of hotels since then, but never another short-term rental. I guess once you've seen the things people hide behind the filters and polished photos, you start wondering what else they aren't showing you. And the scariest part? I don't think that house was dirty because someone forgot to clean. I think it was left exactly the way someone wanted it to be. I was in Bristol for a freelance design job. A short-term contract, nothing major, just a few illustrations for a niche publisher that needed them turned around quickly. I figured I'd turn it into a work trip and rent somewhere quiet to stay focused. I wanted peace, natural light, a clean desk, and a door I could close behind me. Somewhere I could work without distraction. I found this Airbnb listing in a neighborhood outside the city, near the River Avon. The host described it as a cozy artist's retreat. Quiet, private, complete with a writing desk, blackout curtains, and absolutely no noise from neighbors. Perfect, right? The photos showed a charming two-story place with ivy on the bricks, minimalist decor, and a decent-looking desk by a big window. The reviews were vague but positive. The host's name was Jess. She had one of those generic profiles. A picture of her on a hiking trail with a golden retriever, and a brief bio about loving to meet new people from all over the world. I booked 5 nights. It looked ideal. I arrived on a Thursday afternoon in early March. It had just rained, and the pavement still glistened with puddles. The sky was dull and gray, and everything smelled like wet leaves and chimney smoke. I walked from the station, passing shuttered storefronts, empty bus stops, and an old, graffitied playground with one swing that moved lazily in the wind. The house was tucked at the end of a short lane. Narrow garden, a few dead plants near the entrance, an appealing welcome mat that read, "You better have wine." I rang the bell, but no one answered. Just as I was about to message her, the door creaked open on its own. No greeting. Inside, it was dim and smelled like an odd mix of lavender and damp towels. The hallway was narrow, coats stuffed onto hooks, a soggy umbrella leaning against the wall. A voice called down from upstairs, distracted and muffled. It's open, just come in, I'm on a call. I stepped into the living room, which felt more like someone's actual home than a rental. There were crumpled receipts on the coffee table, a mug with dried tea rings, and a candle labeled Pumpkin Harvest that had long burned out. The kitchen was at the end of the hall, and I noticed a stack of dishes in the sink and a trash bin that smelled faintly sour. Jess came down about 5 minutes later, phone in hand, hoodie half-zipped, pajama pants, barefoot. She didn't really greet me, just gestured vaguely toward the staircase. Room's upstairs. Second door on the left. The blackout curtains are there, I think. Desk too. I'm heading out in a bit, so just make yourself at home. Then she slipped out the back door with a cigarette, leaving it wide open behind her. Upstairs, the room was not what was advertised. First off, the blackout curtains were sheer gray panels that barely covered the windows. The sunlight poured in from every angle, catching the floating dust in the air. The so-called artist desk was a wobbly particle board table with one leg shimmed with a pack of tissues. The chair was a folding one, the kind you use at weddings. There was a faint smell of cat litter. I looked around, but saw no pet. I dropped my bag and checked my phone. I needed to catch up on emails, but the reception inside was weak, and there was no router in the room, or anywhere else that I could see. I went downstairs and found Jess on the couch, staring at her phone. "Hey," I said. "Sorry, there's no desk lamp or decent chair up there. Also, the curtains aren't really blackout, and the room's super bright." She shrugged without looking up. "Oh. Yeah. They must have switched out the curtains last month. You can move to the guest room if you want, but it's right by the neighbors. Might be noisier." I didn't answer. I just nodded and went back upstairs. Something about the tone in her voice felt indifferent, like I was just another inconvenience passing through. That night I struggled to fall asleep. There were small creaks and groans in the house, which I assumed were just normal old building noises, but the walls felt thinner than they should have been. I kept hearing things, muffled footsteps, the subtle scrape of something against the floorboards downstairs, the soft rustle of fabric. It wasn't loud, but it didn't stop. I finally dozed off sometime after midnight. But the second night, that's when things crossed the line. It was around 1:15 a.m. I had just drifted off when I heard a distinct click from downstairs. The kind of sound a door makes when someone unlocks it quietly. I sat still in bed, eyes open in the dark. A few seconds passed. Then a faint creak. The door opened. Closed again. Very softly. The air felt heavier somehow. Then I heard footsteps on the tile. Bare feet. Slowly crossing the hallway. Then a pause. Then creak, 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 the stairs. Not hurried steps. Measured. Careful. Like someone deliberately trying not to wake me. I sat up slowly and reached for my phone. The screen lit the room just enough to see my bag at the foot of the bed. I stood, staying against the wall. Then the door handle turned. Silently. No knock. Just a gentle rotation. It didn't open all the way, just an inch. I stopped breathing. Then it opened a little more. And Jess stepped inside. She was barefoot. Still in the same hoodie. Her phone was in one hand, but she wasn't looking at it. Her eyes drifted across the room until they landed on my bag. She didn't see me at first. I was in the corner by the closet. "What are you doing?" I said quietly. She jumped, startled, visibly startled. Then tried to play it off with a breathy laugh. "Oh, sorry, I thought you were out. Just wanted to check if you left your charger." Her eyes were on the bag. She hadn't glanced toward any outlet. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. That weird pause stretched a bit too long. Then she turned and slipped out without another word. I waited until I heard her descend the stairs. Then I called the local police. I didn't embellish anything, just said I was staying in a rental, and the host came into the room after midnight without knocking, uninvited. 2 officers arrived about 25 minutes later. They were polite but firm. Jess tried to explain it all away, said she thought I had left, that she was just checking to see if I left anything valuable behind. They asked me if I wanted to press charges. I said no. I just wanted to leave. I packed my things in silence while one of the officers waited downstairs. I booked a last-minute room at a hotel by the station and walked out with them. I used to rent a flat with a friend in a quiet part of North Sheffield, near the hills where the city starts to taper off into green. The apartment was old, but roomy, split across 2 floors with a small balcony that overlooked a slow-moving canal. We'd lived there for nearly 2 years, and for most of that time, we'd rented out the 3rd bedroom on a short-term basis through a listing site. It started as a way to help with rent, but surprisingly, most of the people who came through were decent. Travelers passing through for a few days, artists on exhibition runs, even a retired woman from Greece who spent her mornings feeding the pigeons from the balcony and offering us herbal tea. It added some variety to our lives, and we never had any major issues. Until we hosted him. He was listed as a tourist from Adelaide, staying for 9 days. His profile picture showed a tanned guy, maybe mid-30s, in a button-up shirt beside a beach, grinning wide. Seemed normal enough. When he arrived, though, something didn't feel right. The first time I met him, he didn't really look at me, just nodded slowly and muttered a thank you. His clothes were clean, but wrinkled, like they'd been stuffed into a bag and forgotten. His voice was low, drawn out, and he blinked more slowly than most people I've ever met. He never introduced himself properly, and I didn't catch his name the first few times I asked, which made it more awkward the longer I waited to bring it up again. He never said much to me, but I noticed he had long conversations with himself. At first, I thought he was on the phone, but I never saw him holding one. I'd hear muffled talking coming from behind his door, almost rhythmic, like a sermon under his breath. Sometimes he'd pause for long stretches, then start back up with a different tone. My roommate worked night shifts at the hospital. That meant I was usually the one who interacted with the guests. And that also meant I was often alone with them in the flat. It was winter. Mid-December. Darkness crept in early, around 4 in the afternoon. The cold outside always made the flat feel warmer than it actually was, which gave the place a weird, insulated quality. Quiet and sealed off, like time slowed down in there. That evening I got back from work a little past 5. The hallway was dim, and smelled faintly of damp carpet and the ginger tea I'd left steeping in the kitchen that morning. I remember that clearly. I dropped my bag by the shoe rack, kicked off my boots, and made my way to my room at the far end. The corridor narrowed there, and the lighting was poor. One of the bulbs had gone out, and the landlord kept promising to send someone to fix it. That area of the hallway always made me feel like I had to speed up a bit, like something was always one step too close. I closed my door, powered up my PC, and sat down to answer some emails. I'd just opened my browser when I became aware of a presence behind me. No sound. No footsteps. Just a shift in the air, something primal, like the way animals sense a predator long before they see it. I turned slightly in my chair. He was standing inside my room. Just standing there. Barefoot, still, maybe 2 or 3 feet behind me. His mouth was half open. His eyes heavy, almost vacant, like he wasn't seeing the room but something far behind it. His neck was tilted slightly, not to the side like confusion, but downward, like his chin was sinking into his chest. I stared at him for several seconds before saying anything. Something in my body was braced, not in fear exactly, but in that unnatural way it reacts when things don't line up. Like my brain was still trying to figure out if this was really happening. "Can I help you with something?" His eyes seemed to twitch back into focus. He didn't move. Didn't smile or gesture or shift his weight. Just stood there and said, I heard voices. I didn't know how to respond to that. My room was quiet. No TV, no music, no call. "Voices from where?" I asked. He just blinked slowly, like he didn't understand the question. I stood up. "Look, I'd appreciate it if you knock next time before coming in. This is my room. We've got rules here." He didn't answer. Just turned around slowly and left. I walked over to the door and locked it. Not because I was afraid, at least that's what I told myself, but just to set a boundary. That's what I kept repeating in my head. A boundary. I didn't tell my roommate right away. He wouldn't be home until morning anyway, and honestly, I didn't know how to explain it without sounding paranoid. People are weird sometimes, especially when they're in unfamiliar places. One morning I left for work and noticed the guest's door was wide open. Not halfway, not cracked, fully open, like an invitation or a trap. Inside, the bed was made. Perfectly made. Like a hotel. Except the pillows were stacked vertically, one on top of the other, against the wall, not the headboard. No sign of his bags. No clothes on the floor. No smell of deodorant or soap or anything at all. Just blank air. He didn't leave a trace of life in that room. Then came the worst part. My roommate came home one morning just before 6 a.m. and sent me a voice note. He didn't usually message me unless something was wrong. He said he came into the flat and found the guest completely naked, sitting upright on the sofa. Not asleep. Not drunk. Just sitting there, staring at the black TV screen. His hands resting on his knees, body motionless. No lights on in the living room. No reaction to the front door opening. My roommate backed out slowly and texted me instead of confronting him. He said he didn't feel safe. We both agreed then and there. We had to cut the stay short. I sent the platform a polite but urgent message saying the guest had breached boundaries and made us feel uncomfortable. They allowed us to cancel the booking early. The man didn't protest when we asked him to leave. He just nodded slowly, gathered his bag, which I still don't know where he kept, and walked out the door without saying goodbye. After he left, we found something unsettling. Inside the shared bathroom, behind the mirror cabinet, wedged in the gap behind the sink pipe, was a small clump of hair. Human hair, tied with a piece of red thread. I had a job interview in Leeds a few months ago, early spring, still cold enough to see your breath in the mornings. The company wasn't offering to cover hotel costs, and I couldn't afford to blow too much money on a last-minute place. So I booked a cheap Airbnb just outside the city, near Walton Hill, where the old mill buildings had been converted into apartment blocks. It wasn't my first time using Airbnb, and I stayed in all kinds of places, some charming, some weird, some forgettable. I don't usually expect luxury, just the basics: clean sheets, hot water, a functioning lock. But this place was something else entirely. The listing had decent reviews. I didn't dig too deep, just skimmed a few lines that said things like, "Nice spot, close to town, host was polite." The photos showed a compact flat, one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, a small bathroom with a skylight. It wasn't fancy, but it looked fine. When I got off the train, it was already dark. Around 8:30. I walked the 10 minutes from the station, dragging my duffel bag behind me. The road leading up to the flat curved uphill through a quiet residential street. Rows of semi-detached houses, brick walls covered in ivy, empty driveways. The air smelled like wet bark and faint exhaust fumes. The building itself looked like it had been slapped together in the late 90s and never updated. Beige plaster walls, moss in the cracks between the pavement tiles. A single outside light flickered above the door, casting a jittery glow over a rusted mailbox. The buzzer didn't work, so I knocked. After a minute, a woman opened the door. Maybe late 40s, short hair, pale eyes. Her cardigan was buttoned unevenly, and she had a cigarette in one hand. "You're the guest?" she asked, not smiling. I nodded. She motioned for me to come in, then turned and walked back into the hallway without another word. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. The smell hit me first, not foul exactly, just stagnant. Like sour coffee and damp laundry left to rot in a warm room. The hallway light was off, so I followed her silhouette past the kitchen. The floor stuck slightly under my shoes, like soda had spilled and never been mopped up. She pointed toward a door on the right. That's the room. Bathroom's down the hall. Don't use the washer. It leaks. I muttered a thanks, but she'd already disappeared down another corridor. I didn't see her again for the rest of the night. Inside the guest room, the bed was made, but the sheets were visibly wrinkled, like someone had been lying there earlier and just pulled them back into place. The pillow smelled faintly of perfume and something bitter underneath, like old sweat masked by floral spray. I set down my bag and opened the window, but the pane stuck halfway and refused to budge further. I didn't want to touch anything else unnecessarily, so I left it as it was and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to shake off the unease. After a few minutes, I wandered out to check the bathroom. That was when things really started to feel wrong. The counter was cluttered with bottles, cheap shampoo, empty contact lens cases, half-used deodorant sticks, cracked plastic combs. It wasn't staged like most Airbnbs. It looked lived in. There were clumps of hair in the sink, some long, some short. The kind of strands you find after someone's just brushed aggressively. The mirror was streaked with fingerprints and toothpaste flecks. One of the towels hanging on the back of the door was damp. I backed out of the bathroom and glanced into the kitchen. I wish I hadn't. The sink was filled with dirty dishes, bowls with dried cereal crust, cloudy glasses, spoons stuck to plates. A moldy dishcloth lay crumpled on the counter. There were crumbs and stains on the floor, like someone had spilled pasta sauce and never cleaned it. A greasy pan sat on the stove, congealed fat pooled around the edges. It looked like no one had made a proper attempt at cleaning in weeks. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a guest-ready rental. This was her home. And she hadn't even tried to pretend otherwise. I walked back to my room and closed the door, latching it quietly. I sat for a while, unsure what to do. I was only supposed to be here for one night. Just get some sleep, show up to the interview, and head back. I laid down in my clothes. I must have dozed off at some point, because when I woke up, the room was pitch black. My phone said 2:46 a.m. At first, I couldn't figure out what had woken me. Then I heard it. A soft clicking sound, like metal tapping lightly against ceramic. Click. Pause. Click. Click, click. It was faint, but it was definitely coming from the bathroom. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, barely breathing. The sound stopped. Then something creaked, slow and heavy, like weight shifting on floorboards. I got up quietly and pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. I cracked it open an inch and peeked into the hallway. Pitch dark. No footsteps. No voices. I decided to check the time again. My phone battery had died. That's when I noticed something else. The scent in the hallway had changed. It was heavier now, sweet, almost rotten. Like overripe fruit left out too long. It clung to the walls. My eyes watered slightly. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, but that smell was real. Faint but present. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat upright, listening. At one point, maybe around 4 a.m., I heard the front door open. Slowly. Then close. No voices. No footsteps going out or coming in. Just the door. I stayed in my room until the sun came up. By morning, the host was nowhere to be found. Her bedroom door was open, but the bed was untouched. A single mug sat in the middle of the kitchen counter, still warm to the touch. I grabbed my bag and left without saying goodbye. I canceled the rest of the reservation from a coffee shop in town. No refund. I didn't bother asking. Weeks later, I tried to find the listing again. It was gone. Not just removed, wiped. The username, the reviews, everything. Like it had never existed. Sometimes I wonder where she goes when she rents the place out. because it was very clear to me that place was still being lived in. Maybe not by her. Maybe not by just her. Thank you for staying with me through the darkness. If you enjoy these late night chills, consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me keep the stories coming. Hit that like button if this one creeped under your skin, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next unsettling tale when it drops. Until next time, sleep tight. And don't turn your back on the shadows.